I'm also a journalist and a teacher, and a lifetime ago I was a musician. I worked at the Star for probably 15 years in the 80s and 90s. Did a lot of stories, local stories obviously. And then I went on to teach, but I came back to journalism, and I've done a lot of work for Pioneer Press, which was owned by the Sun-Times when I joined, and then was owned by the Tribune, still owned by the Tribune. So I was technically an editor at the Sun-Times and the Tribune, even though it was Pioneer Press. And I say that because a journalist is here who knows better. Anyway, so this whole thing came about because in the mid-2000 teens, maybe 16, 17, an old friend of mine from Rich East called me and said, you know, I've got an idea for a book. And it's about a post I saw on Facebook. And it was one of our classmates who had posted after, I believe it was after George Zimmerman was acquitted of the Trayvon Martin killing. And she, there was all these protests were going on, and she posted on Facebook, I don't understand all this racial animosity. I'm paraphrasing because you're going to get to see the post in the clip. But this isn't how it was how I grew up, Was the racial harmony we experienced growing up real? Or was it different for the black kids? Because I don't really know what it was like for them. And so she had a little bit of response, but he wanted to write a book, and he was a teacher, and I said, if we write a book, I'm going to end up doing all the writing. So at the time, I was shooting videos for the Chicago Sun-Times on my phone and with this wonderful app. And I was like, let's make a documentary. As if we could do it on our phones, So we talked about it, we met with a film editor, we met with people to talk, we got a lot of feedback, and we just kept putting it on the shelf. And I remember in 2019, I went to a Historical Society event on African American history in Park Forest. And Marla Dillard, who's here, was on the panel. And what I heard at the panel was exactly what I thought we had experienced. And so I remember getting back to my creative partner, I was like, we got to do this, But we put it on the shelf again. And then the George Floyd murder happened. And he texted me and he said, here we are again. And I texted him back and said, let's do it. And he went out and bought cameras and we started interviewing people. So we have interviewed probably 30 people, a little more than 30. Probably 20 to 25, I call them kids, black kids who grew up in Park Forest. They're not kids anymore. But our expertise was the 70s and 80s, because that's when we grew up. And so we did a lot of research too. Brendan has done even more research, thankfully. But we discovered that this all started, it's funny because I usually have to tell the story of the history. You people don't need to know the story of the history. But we found out, as you all know, that it started in 1959. And there was a list of all the black families, and there was a thing called integration maintenance. And all these things kind of blew our minds about that this had all happened. And in fact, it upset my original partner so much, some of the things that happened, that he quit. And so our team has been a little fluid. Our current team is really solid. I'd like to introduce them when we're finished here. But we've, from the beginning, made an effort to make sure that there are black and white folks on this team, because we can't tell the story of either without both. So we interviewed these kids. They were kids when I was a kid, and we found that there was this arc of what I will call racial harmony, for lack of a better term, that began in about 1972. We discovered that there was really a lot of kids in the 60s, black kids, experienced racism, blatant racism, a little bit of systemic racism, all kinds of things that, as a young white boy, I had no idea what was going on. But then we interviewed enough people that we discovered that by 1972, it started to become the harmony that we thought it was. And this was repeated over and over by almost every person we interviewed. There were two people who did not experience Utopia. or, you know, we all question the use of the word utopia. Let me just say that tentative title, which was, the original title of the film was I Grew Up in Utopia. And we took that from that panel where Myrtle Martin had explained how her sons had called Park Forest utopian on their college essays, their college application essays. So but after we interviewed more and more people, we found that utopia was not the right word, and that there was so much stuff that had happened that, you know, a better way of looking at it would be calling it revisiting utopia. We still have people who said black people who said I experienced no racism at all, which was hard to believe. But within the boundaries of Park Forest, there was different things going on, I think. Anyway, there was one person we interviewed, she's in the trailer I'm going to show you, the new trailer. Cathy Simpson, she's the daughter of William Simpson, who wrote over 900 letters to the editor of the Star and the Reporter. Very critical of integration maintenance. And Cathy left Park Forest as soon as she graduated high school. And for her, it was a struggle. She said she got called the N-word on a weekly basis. You know, she was never around for what we thought was the golden age. She left Park Forest and never came back. And then we had one other young man who had experienced just an awful introduction to the town, where a white kid showed up at his door. A white kid who was later convicted of murder showed up at his door and knocked on the door and told his mom that he wanted to kick her son's ass. And so this guy went through a long acclimation in Park Forest. He's like class of '83, and you know, and in his interview he tells a lot of stuff, and he said, "I eventually got invited to the parties, and then everything was okay." Now that's a little bit of a magic sweep, right? But overall, otherwise, we heard this story of, the thing we kept hearing over and over was, there's no place else like it. We've never gone somewhere else where there was something that rivaled it. With one exception, actually. Marla said in her interview that there was something, I just remembered that there was a town in the Detroit area that she felt was similar. But everybody else, you know, for the most part, said that it was very unique. So we put out a trailer 2 years ago where we raised money on Indiegogo, and it was basically a collage of all the interviews. A lot of great quotes we got from people, all kinds of stuff. But it was not clear what the story arc was. The basic question was still there: did this harmony happen? But we didn't make it clear in the trailer whether it did or how it happened. So anyway, we have a new trailer. We're raising money again now, and I'm going to show you the updated one, which I believe captures the story arc. And interestingly, it's been a little bit, because it's a little more specific about some of the racism. Some folks on Facebook were a little more touched or upset about it, you know, that anyone would suggest that, you know, racism happened in Park Forest. All right, so this is the trailer that is currently on